Luke Warmstand Houston. When you were in TNA, what was the atmosphere like when TNA was transitioning from weekly pay-per-views into weekly Impact TV shows? Did you think TNA was growing into something special, or did you view TNA as just another wrestling promotion?
No, there was a sense that we were getting some momentum. When Bob Carter came in and we started doing the Wednesday night pay-per-views, and then we would jump on the private plane, his private plane or chartered plane, and fly from Nashville down to Orlando and do the TNA tapings at the Impact Zone. There was a sense that there was momentum in the company, and we had a fairly strong entity with the X division. I remember being involved in the booking committee and the booking meetings. That was like a go-to for us. If we needed like something good in the ring, we would grab something from the X division. And then shortly after that, I don't know whose decision it was, but they started blurring that line between the X division and the other people. And then suddenly it became, okay, AJ Styles versus Kevin Nash, and we stopped talking about the X division. So we had sort of splayed ourselves and jettisoning the one asset that we had that we could have built on. And at the time in the business, it was starting to go towards these smaller guys that were a lot more acrobatic and what today would be called spot monkey. There was a trajectory towards that in the industry. The fans had grown tired of the lumbering big guys, tackle, no sell it, that kind of thing. And suddenly here comes these guys that are really talented. And, I know, like, working specifically with AJ was very diligent about picking it up and getting it to understand it. Really open to the idea of learning. And we jettisoned that. So yeah, at the time we started going to Orlando to shoot the televisions there. There was a sense that here we are suddenly we have two buildings on the lot, right? We have the studio and then the building where the green room and the production meetings all were, and everybody's offices. And there was a feeling that, okay, the little engine starting to chug up the hill, but having been involved with a company like that, with ECW and this little engine that could and just kept going, it was pretty clear that in short order, that with Dixie there was always this impediment, an unnecessary impediment. With all due respect to everybody outside of our business, I know what I know because I've been in this business for 40 years and been a fan of it for a lot longer than that, and been a diligent student of it while I've been in it. And there's still stuff I learn. So the idea that we can hire some 20-year-old great writer of sitcoms to become a writer for wrestling, the same thing back would be saying, well, why am I sitting here talking with you? I should be in Hollywood writing sitcoms because I've been a great wrestler for 40 years. It's not interchangeable parts. To understand the nuances of, being involved in the ring and, getting kicked in the head or slammed on your head or something, you still have to get the match to a finish. Understanding how to get a character over, all those things that I talked about Funk earlier in the episode 2 weeks ago. I think, comes up now is like we're seeing all of this sort of blah be put into it. And the first day I met Dixie, she followed me into the green room and she said, my father's really impressed with your resume. And she starts reciting it to me. And she said, how impressed her father was with me. And if I were to give him one piece of advice, what would it be? And, she had just been introduced to us at the production meeting. Dixie has a very professional way about her. You could tell she's been well bred that way, right? So she knows the right things to say, and she's a very professional person. And then I'm thinking, well, whoa, one piece of advice. God, I can give him a million pieces of advice. And then it struck me, not even paying attention as I'm changing to go do my on screens, that the show has started. And she's standing in the doorway and the monitor's behind me. So my back is to the monitor. And I said to her, well, if I were to tell just one piece of advice, I could give him a million pieces of advice, but I would tell him to in no way, shape, or form intend or try to be WWF 2, WWF Junior, WWF Light, be TNA 1. And then I made to her the mistake of invoking ECW. I said, like ECW did. We went for the 18 to 49 male demographic and we owned them. Her response to me was, why would we want to copy ECW? After all, it failed. Before I could say anything to her, something happened in the ring, the show that had now started, the monitor behind me, and the fans started chanting in the impact zone, ECW, ECW. So my answer to her was I stepped back and looked at the monitor and looked back at her, back at the monitor and back at her. Like, are you getting the irony of this? Like, you say ECW, we failed on a business level, but clearly the product, even now, still holds sway. And so clearly we did something right. Right from the time of her inception into the company, her insertion into the company, her brother Todd, who was a fairly smart guy, pretty bright guy, as I recall, and Bob, who was obviously a bright guy, and very down to earth. Not at all like the other billionaires I'd met before that. Seemed to me that Todd and Bob really had the desire and the wherewithal to do the right thing. Dixie, however, came in, and it was always this plan to do A, B, and C. And she would say, well, I think we should do CBA. And we'd do CBA. And then I would explain to her why it's not going to work. Like we have to do this. If we're going to go that direction, we're going to have to put these intervening steps in to make this make sense. And this went on for the better part of 2 or 3 years, where she would ask my advice. I would give it. She wouldn't take it. In 2 weeks, we'd come back and I would get, hey, you were right. How do we fix it? I would tell her that, my opinion of what we should do. And she wouldn't do that. And then 2 weeks, say, hey, you were right again. We should do it. Now what? And this went on for a couple of years, to the point where, just to entertain myself, one time I said to her something like, I really think we should put AJ out there with a pink tutu and just, see what he does with it. And she's like, listen, I'm telling her like the secrets of the universe. Here comes my Albert Einstein impression, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, like I'm pulling your leg, lady, and she just didn't get it. And not shortly after I left, there were always times with Dixie that we would need somebody to be the representative, the face of the company. If Terry Taylor went out, if I went out, Scott D'Amore went out, whatever, we were all sort of seen as wrestlers in the company, and she would always put her finger up like that and say, I'm management, not on-air talent. And would never do it. And so we'd have to make up some hodgepodge of like some other way to get where we needed to be. So a month or two after I leave, I see her in the ring with Hogan doing a crab and taking the 3D through a table. And somebody's been bitten by the TV bug, right? Suddenly we're not so management anymore. And, again, I think the shame of it is Bob had put a boatload of money, hundreds of millions of dollars into that, and Spike too. And the end result was nothing to show for it. Now you could argue that TNA is still floating along, and that's because of the other people from Canada that came in and all of that. My contention would be that with the talent we had come through there and the people we had working in the office, Terry Taylor and Jeff Jarrett and me and so many others, Dutch, Vince, there was an awful lot of acumen in that production room, that it failed in spite of that. And so you have to look for the obvious culprit. Is somebody not doing the right thing here? And that one person would be Dixie, the one person that could make those decisions. And like she said to me one time, I had gone and gotten Scott D'Amore come to me and he said, hey, Bob wants you to start finding buildings like in and around Pittsburgh. As you've run Pittsburgh and Ohio, and you'll find some buildings. I found a phenomenal building in Chester, West Virginia. It's a casino, where ESPN at the time was doing on ESPN too. They were doing boxing every Tuesday night live. So this incredible arena, lights, sound, everything tailor made. They wanted us to pay $1,000 to rent the building, but that included the building, rooms for all the crew, rooms for all the talent, the venue, the lights, the sound, everything we would need $1,000. And all they wanted from us was to make 2 wrestlers available every couple hours to sit in the casino and sign autographs, take pictures. I took it to Dixie after working on this and pulling a lot of favors in. I take it to Dixie and she said, I'll give that to, and she said a name that I'd never heard. I said, who's that? She says, it's the head of our live events. It's our live events coordinator. I said, we have a live events coordinator? Like, we had never done a live event. And so I hand this stuff off. I find this guy and I hand it off to him. I never heard another word. Nick Busick, by the way, who passed away a few years ago, Blacktop Bully. He was working with the guy that owned the casino and got this for us. And so you can imagine a few months later, whenever I see him and I say, "Hey, how's that going?" He's going, "I don't know, never heard from anybody." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, I mean, this is a freebie as much as a freebie goes. And, and I'm sure there were a million incidences like that in spite of themselves, they just couldn't get over, in spite of the talent, in spite of the money, in spite of all the things like getting buildings, incredible buildings for $1,000. In spite of all that, it still failed. And that to me, I think is just a sin, from the money that Bob and Spike put in, and for the fervor the fans put in, for the effort the wrestlers put in, for the effort we put in the production meeting. It failed in spite of all that. And that's like WCW Redux.